Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's coffee hour. Today, we'll be interviewing Dr. Gururaj Naik, and our interviewer is going to be Samuel Peana, ECE Ph.D. student and former NSAC president from 2018 to 2020. Professor Naik received his Ph.D. from Purdue University in 2013. He worked with Professor Vladimir Shalav and Professor Alexandra Boltaseva to develop new plasmonic materials for nanophotonic applications. Since fall of 2016, Professor Naik has been an assistant professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering, Rice University. His research interests lie in the application of the nanophotonic principles of energy, imaging, and health. So without further ado, I present to you Professor Gururaj Naik and our interviewer, Sam. Sam, off to you.
Well, thank you very much, Mauricio, for the kind introduction. So thank you once again, Guru, for joining us. Like I told my advisor, Professor Shalayev and Sasha Boltaseva, that within our group, the Shalayev group, you're like a legendary entity, right? That exists sort of like it's whispered. Your name is whispered in the halls around the sputtering machines. So I'm very excited to finally get to meet you in person.
Thank you very much for this a kind introduction and also this opportunity to speak to my Purdue family, I would say. I think Vlad and Sasha's group clearly was a game changer in my life. And I have learned so much from there, which I'm using even every day. I thank them for that. And this is a great opportunity to just interact with my Purdue family. Thank you.
Well, that's another thing that's emphasized, right? Is that we're all one big family, and it definitely feels that way. So we have to get the most serious questions out of the way first. So, as a person in Texas, how many pairs of cowboy boots do you own?
But just one for now.
For now, okay. So you have you've written grants planning out your next set of to increase the supply of cowboy boots.
I think that's part of the budget.
Yeah, Texas grants specifically have a section for cowboy boots. Student salaries, equipment, cowboy boots, and hats. So I'm assuming as soon as you cross the Texas state border, you know, there's a stand that sells the boots, so you can't really go in without cowboy boots.
I guess maybe only slight differences since I work in the field of nano. Maybe those boots have to be nano. That's it.
That works. You have them like on a keychain, encapsulated. So you know, your journey from India all the way to Texas is quite kind of impressive, right? It's like a lot of on the road. So one thing that you know, I always am curious about is like where did you grow up, and like what was your world like, you know, before high school, let's say? Like what was that like? Like describe a day in the life of let's say 13-year-old Guru.
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up in India in a city called Bangalore. So Bangalore is the Silicon City of India. So that's the Silicon capital. That's where a lot of IT companies, etc., are located. And a typical day, you asked. Yeah, that's in fact now if I look back, it seems like wow, that's too long. Maybe I don't even. It looks like maybe those days were just like myths. Those never existed. Clearly, things have changed quite a lot in my life, and also just the Bangalore itself, the city.
Right.
The city is so fast growing, at least in the past 20 years, has just dramatically changed that we cannot identify the same houses, the same roads, and that's how fast it is. But clearly, I think compared to the scenario, the situation that I'm in, or at least the USA is in, that's very different in India. I would say probably a lot slower, at least to start with. And I think spending time with parents do really make a very big difference. And with family members just all spread around, I think I would say a lot of my daytime, apart from maybe going to school or homework or etc., would actually go in social interaction. It could be like maybe playing with friends, or maybe I have a sister too, so maybe quarreling with her or something else. But apart from that, I think that's the major difference that I noticed from my life in India to life here. That is, a lot of my social activities, like planned out daily uh, or in the weekends as well, those have come down, and then actually those time has been picked up by my academic or other professional work. I think, which I feel is really good and a nice change.
Right. So basically, it sounds like in Bangalore, when you were there, it had a lot more of this like porch, like in America, in rural cities, there's this idea of people on their porches, and kids will go between houses and hang out with
That's
all
right.
kinds of people. So very community kind of oriented.
Yeah.
So I think 13 is kind of that age where people start to realize some extent what they're interested in, right? Like the people who are very artistic tend to start expressing. So when did you kind of realize that science, engineering, or these sort of hard sciences were for you? Like when do you have any like moments in time that you think were particularly key?
Sure, yeah, I remember it really well. Especially, I think it's not when I was 13. It was much younger.
Okay.
Probably, I think maybe when I was 7 or 8. My mom used to tell stories, and then she used to tell stories about Newton, Edison, Einstein. I remember her telling the stories, and then they are very inspirational in the sense, for example, how they were sent out of schools just because, for example, Einstein asked question about why did, when somebody was teaching a world war or maybe some other war, he asked, why I don't want to know the facts of this war, but I want to know why those men were fighting against each other. And the history teacher was just upset about it and sent him out of the class. So those moments were really the true inspirational stories that I had. And then I was quite sure, yeah, this is something exciting, that someday I should be one such scientist. So that, I think, idea came up really very early in my life. And I think something which in my childhood my parents would scorn at me was my inquisitiveness to put a lot of things into flame. So especially, I think we had a small. so, so I used to
You're
actually like.
following the example of Newton perfectly. That dude burned so many things.
So we used to, for example, try sugar or salt, or see salt splintering from the fire, and then wondering why this is happening, while just sugar turns into completely black charcoal, or charred black. I think those were surely. I mean, I can see if my son does now as a parent, I can see that, okay, how parents can feel it as a problem. But I thoroughly enjoyed as a boy then.
Right.
But my parents, I think, never discouraged me. They said, yeah, there is a reason why that happens, and you should understand it rather than just try it out without knowing what it is.
Right.
So that was, I think, something I surely owe to them
So this
in
is
inspiring me.
it's interesting. Like, so what did your parents do? Because it sounds like they both had a very sort of scientific mindset. Is there anything in particular that they did?
Yes, yeah. My mom was a high school teacher, so she would in fact teach history and English at high school. And my dad was a scientist, so he was working in an aerospace laboratory in India, in
Okay.
Bangalore. Yeah. But I think I have visited with him many times the laboratories as well as a small kid. But I have seen, for example, a wind tunnel or a model of a light combat aircraft or something when I was small.
Right.
But I think something that has stuck with me more than those ones are actually the stories, like I said, of Newton or Einstein or Edison. Those have made such a strong impression that even now, when I listen to them, I feel more attentive. Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's very interesting, and it's wonderful. I guess that it's wonderful that your mother and father were able to sort of teach you. So you grew up, as a burgeoning pyromaniac. You then go to high school, which I know in India is a brutal kind of experience, very hard. So what did it's like at some point, right? So you know you want to do science, and there's Newton, Edison, and these actually encompass like from pure science all the way to very applied engineering. So when did you start to make that distinction of saying I want to do engineering instead of, let's say, applied math or pure math, or because that's actually where the
Yeah, you just hit the core of the problem. At my heart, I always wanted to be in science, a scientist. But as you know, I think it's really hard for true or just a scientist to find a job in India. And for that matter, though my father was a scientist by his designation, his degree was actually in engineering. So
right.
in India, it was common that only engineers or people with engineering degrees would get jobs, and
Right.
others, it's usually harder. And my parents didn't think that I would actually study anything more than just bachelor's. So they thought that, okay, maybe we should give him a chance to pick a safe career path so that by his bachelor's he will get a job.
Right, which is a good move. So I guess so in high school, I guess the curriculum is pretty fixed, so there's no specialization there. But then you decide to go into electronics and communication, because particularly I remember in 2000, because you went to college in 2002 to 2006, that was like the telecommunications boom at that time. That's when all the broadband started to come out. So I'm sure everyone was excited at that time. So you take these classes. So it was on the recommendation of your parents to go into this. But if you had defied your parents, right, which subject would you have studied in undergrad?
Chemistry.
I was about to ask you, because it's like I like to burn things, and that's literally what they do in chemistry. So I was surprised that you didn't go into chemistry. So you do this. Okay, now it's beginning to make more sense how you ended up in advanced material science. So you start out with you do this. So in college, what courses did you hate the most? Like, which ones did you were like, oh my goodness, like if I have to do this for the rest of my career, I regret everything. And which ones did you find like most interesting or inspiring or useful?
Yeah, I think the ones that I would or I rather hated. I don't want to use the strong word hate, but still something that I didn't like was languages.
which is a
Actually,
big
my
irony,
mother.
because you speak very well.
No, it was not English though, but it was my mother tongue. I really love, and I also write sometimes if I have time in my mother tongue. But still, somehow the way that it was taught, or the syllabus, etc., something it didn't really catch my attention much. So that was I would call it something that I just managed because I had to.
Right.
That's it. Yeah.
I
But
know that feeling.
It's something, excuse me, something in particular that I really loved was organic chemistry. So that was a course where, in fact, the lab was even more exciting. So we had some experiments. In one case, actually, just a simple protein test. So we were doing, so there was some albumin of egg, and we were trying to see if there is or if with the reagent it shows a color change. As it should have turned yellowish, so that we know it's a protein. So they just put this nitric acid into it, and then nothing happened. So all my lecturers, they were like, "What is happening?" And everybody is watching them, and it's not working clearly. And they added a little bit more nitric acid, concentrated nitric acid. Nothing happened. And then I was just watching in the back, and then just said, "Add a drop of concentrated sulfuric acid." And they were like reluctant, and then added, and immediately it turned yellow. And it was like, wow.
Yeah.
Also, I was really into chemistry. I would read things that were more than just what was in syllabus. I'd pick, for example, Morrison and Boyd was my most favorite book of chemistry. I have organic chemistry. I have literally like taken, read it overnight and then solved every problem in it, exercise problem. So I was really very passionate then with organic chemistry particularly. Yeah.
So I'm very curious how you managed to fit organic chemistry into an electronics and communications engineering degree. So, like your resume when applying for jobs must have been fascinating. It's like standard, electronics, organic chemistry. Oh, okay. Although I guess at that time, actually, with all the optical fiber technology, they actually like kind of this chemistry link was getting more important. So you go did you have to do any kind of like undergrad thesis or for your
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah, this was engineering, so we had a project, not thesis. Yeah, the project was still not anything related to chemistry, though that was my interest. I ended up doing a project in fact, C-based synthesis. That was actually taking a code, a hardware description code, or a code that is described in language C or some other computers or general languages used in describing computer softwares, and then actually use that for synthesizing hardware. So hardware, there is a small element to it, that is softwares usually, I mean, at least the way they're run in computers, not nowadays, but at least some time back, those were all serial things. So one after the other, the instructions are run one after the other.
Right.
But in hardware, you can do parallel processing, parallel computing.
Right.
So the major challenge there was to take this description in a language that is meant to be evaluated or implemented serially, and then somehow find out those paths that were all independent in their implementation, so that you could translate them to parallel approaches in the implementation.
Oh, interesting.
So that was actually my undergraduate project, clearly not related to any of my passion. And of course, actually, I should mention that in my high school time, that was a game changer in the sense in the last 2 years. Of course, I was very much interested in chemistry. I spent a lot of time with that, but actually, I had excellent physics professors then, and I think reading, especially, that was a time when I first was introduced to quantum and even special relativity. So
Right.
that actually changed my interest a lot. And
Right.
since then, I think I was almost into like thermodynamics and, for example, the special relativity. Those two were just, I couldn't get out of them for some time at least. Those were, and I was also like very much into all this amateur astronomers club. I was part of one such in Bangalore, though I think the skies are not so great. I was really excited to do that. So we used to, in fact, I would go to this amateur astronomer club, and then we would actually take our own glass plates and then create lapping pads, and then polish the glass, and then lap it, and then metallize, and then make our own reflector or Newtonian telescopes.
Oh,
So
wow.
I actually made a 6-inch telescope with that. And we would show it on every weekends for public. It would be open for public. Anybody could drop into this planetarium premises, and then if there is a planet or a star that's interesting, they could have a look at it. I used to take part in this one, which was also very interesting. Yeah.
Just to point out for people listening, Newton is famous because he literally did that. The original telescopes were glass, and the problem with glass is, at some point it becomes too big. So he was the one that invented the reflecting telescope, which was, way better than the original. So, so far, yeah, you're on the same track. So you then go to do your master's. So given your passion in organic chemistry, why do a master's in microelectronics rather than, let's say, going and trying to find a job in chemistry or something you were more kind of passionate about?
Yeah, again, I think it goes with the way things happen in Indian education system is very different from here. Often, I think the cream is in some field, and that's the field you want to be, or everyone wants to be, because that's where the cream people are.
I see.
And of course, microelectronics was, or there were actually many sub branches of electrical engineering that was interesting to me. But microelectronics was the one that had most of chemistry stuff or really experimental stuff with it. So I was really interested in experimental research work rather than just theory. So which is what I did mostly in my undergrad. So I wanted to join a field where there was hands-on device fabrication, for example. So that's
I
what
see. So
micro.
how did you, what, was there a particular moment when you realized, okay, theory is nice, it's fun, but I don't want to do that, for a living, right? Was there a moment that made you realize that difference?
Uh, I think I mean, at the end of my high school, we had I had taken up a project separately, just out of my interest, not from my academics. So this was a national program as well in India where I had competed. So where I had proposed uh, an electrochemical sensor. So, and of course, I didn't have any resources because our undergraduate school was not that good in having all the resources to build these things. So I had to create this device, and I had some vision how to do that. And to implement that, I literally had to run into all the small and crowded shops of Bangalore, and then hunt for the chemicals and then the components that I wanted to build this.
Right.
So so clearly the theory part which was backing this design, that was very easy, and I had an idea, already had proposed that. That's why my project was selected for finals. But implementing that was quite hard given the situation. Of course, I did try it actually in my home. I didn't go anywhere. Actually had a small working bench in my home where I would buy all these chemicals and then just work all by myself. I don't know. Now I feel like I should have never done that without chemical safety training.
The advantage, I guess, of being young is
But
you
yeah,
try
luckily,
things.
yeah, nothing happened. My house is still intact. Nothing collapsed. I didn't burn
Was,
anything.
was this at your parents' house?
Yes, yeah.
I'm just, I'm sure your parents were like, "Oh no." Well, yeah. So you definitely had very supportive parents.
Surely, yeah, yeah. They were really very supportive of my case here, and I think what I found in my master's was I had an opportunity to implement this. So
Okay.
clearly, I think an idea, of course, comes from some inspiration, and then some theory goes with it. But eventually, to make it work, there is a lot more than just the idea or the theory behind it. And then
Right.
that was what was attractive to me.
Yeah.
And this microelectronics research, in fact, I developed, I think, zinc oxide thin film transistors then. And that was really cool because we didn't know how to grow this zinc oxide. We didn't have many equipment that could do that. And in the process, I was forced to try out something new, which made me optimize a recipe for making zinc oxide just out of some solvents. So, which is called now sol gel technique. But that was really, I think, in the lab that I worked, they had no idea about how to make this with any of this technique. But the sol gel technique that I developed, I think, was quite a useful thing for them to continue later.
Right.
So, yeah.
So I guess this is like a trademark of your work, is that everywhere you go, there's like new fabrication processes that then people use for years afterward. So it's interesting. So in the end, you go to microelectronics, but always there's a bit of chemistry and material science always kind of seeping into your work, no matter where you go. So then you become this project associate. So what is a project associate?
Yeah, so that's you can think of it as more like a somebody who would take care part of the lab or maybe a super
Okay,
user of an equipment,
I
things
see.
like that. So,
Okay.
I mean, since I was already working with this project on zinc oxide, and there were new students who had joined who were continuing research, so I was actually training them on all this
I see.
equipment and getting them started with their research. Yeah.
All right. And then, of course, now it's like the part where our like histories start to align. So you come to Purdue. How in the world, right? You did all this electronics, you do chemistry. So how did you pick to work with? I think Professor Boltaseva was your advisor. So how
Yes,
did,
that's
out of all the professors, how did you decide Purdue? How did you decide to work with Sasha?
Yeah, so Purdue, of course, my master's university has many people who came to Purdue. So there is a track record of that, and we know what they have become, etc. So that actually makes or made Purdue a very preferable choice for a
Right.
lot of us. In fact, it was not just me, actually, a few others who came to Purdue and then also stayed in Birck, in fact, during my time. So
Okay.
yeah, so that was one of the good things about choosing or coming to Purdue. And then how did I switch to optics? Right. So
Yeah. This
I
is
mean,
like a
I myself,
non-linear turn there.
I myself wonder, and this is what happened. So when I came to Purdue, I came in spring, in fact, January, and then I approached many faculty about working with them or potentially working in their groups. And then, but then I think Professor, I had emailed both Sasha and Vlad about
Yeah.
my interest in their groups. And then at the same time, I had also emailed Tim, who was the director of Birck then, and then
Right.
asked if I can join his group too. And then he was a little slow in replying to me, while Sasha, actually, I think it was Vlad who replied to me saying that, yes, we would be interested in talking to you. Come to Sasha's office. Let's have a chat.
Okay. So basically, your whole career in optics may be very strongly related to the fact that Tim Fisher did not answer his email faster.
Yes, I think that was that I would say is probably accurate. I mean, I might have probably chosen Tim's group rather than, or ended up there rather than
Right.
Sasha's group. But I think, I mean, of course, I had my friend too. Actually, there was I had a friend in Andy Weiner's group who had told me so much about Lad's group. So that was, I think, the first reason why I even
Hmm.
wrote an email and then wanted to join this group. So had such good information and what this group does,
Right.
etc. So that was, I think, surely something that I would have not thought of myself. So credits to
Right.
my friend. And then the interesting part about is actually my first interview with Sasha and Vlad. So
Hmm.
both Sasha and Vlad were in the office, and I go there with my copy of my CV in my hand, and I was a little intimidated knowing that there are actually two faculty sitting to interview me. and and I think I don't know if Vlad remembers this, but I can clearly remember the first question when Vlad asked me a lot of questions.
Hmm.
Sasha was asked probably one or two, but Vlad had many questions to me. And the first question that he had was, "Why was your undergrad institute not IIT?" I didn't know what to say. Clearly, now I feel like I was not such a good, probably prepared grad student.
Wow.
But
But
I think it was a valid question. I mean, I would probably ask my students the same thing, but that's
mhm.
exactly the question Vlad asked. And I was also, I don't know what I answered, but somehow I convinced Vlad that I was not a bad option.
Well, yeah, I guess we're all lucky that that happened in the end. So you come to Vlad and Sasha's group. You make it through this, brutal interview process.
I
I know,
wouldn't.
I know, Vlad and Sasha are listening, so we're joking. But so you come to the group, and what's the first project, right, that you have to work on as a new student?
Yeah, I think then Sasha's group was looking at new optical materials or plasmonic materials, and I just joined this project already. Paul, my predecessor, or who had joined Sasha's group probably a month or 2 months earlier than me, so he had started working on it. And Vlad's student Satoshi, he was also working on this topic. So I
Mhm.
joined these two students. And in the beginning days, it was more like I was reading papers and I didn't understand anything. So, I mean, I come from microelectronics background, and I remember even after maybe a month or so, maybe slightly more than a month, in one of my meetings with Sasha, I told her that, Sasha, I'm reading all these papers that talk about cloaking, that talk about hyperlens, etc., and I don't understand anything.
Yeah.
And Sasha is so nice. I still feel like, how can an advisor be so nice? Really, I mean, I don't know. I cannot imagine somebody more nice than Sasha. She
Hmm.
just said, Guru, research is a different thing, and learning all these things, that's a very different thing. To do research, you are given an opportunity, right? So just think about the problem and continue doing what you're doing. You have next 5 more years to learn about all these things. I
Right.
think the approach that she gave is really amazing. And then I keep telling my students the same thing now.
Yeah.
Clearly, I realized that later that you have a problem, a particular problem in front of you, and
Right.
then being an expert in that particular problem is a need of the time, but
Yeah.
not to be an expert in the whole field, right? So,
Right.
and often I think students who do not get this or get distracted just lose focus. And Sasha was so helpful in just keeping me to the
On the
focus of the
track.
problem. Yes,
Oh,
exactly.
that's wonderful. So you go through because I'm watching the clock and I was like, we got to get to the postdoc era. So you do your PhD, which what would you say of all the work you did at Purdue, what's the one project that you like would go home and just be like, oh my goodness, this is never going to work. Right? Like I think everybody has this kind of project where it's so long, they're so complicated. What project was that for you, and how did you get through that kind of uncertainty and difficulty?
Sure. I think maybe I think when I can probably list one or maybe more than one such projects, but
Then you had a really good PhD.
that's true. Yeah, without failure, there is no learning, right? So, surely, I think one of the challenges that I felt really was challenging was when I started working on nanodiamonds with Misha,
Right.
Mikhail Shalaginov, right? So he was. I think maybe I don't know. I was then I think in my third year. He was just beginning, and then we said, okay, let's begin characterizing this nanodiamonds. And in the initial days, we really had so much trouble just even to isolate one nanodiamond. It was so small. So in SEMs, we were not able to see that. And then
Right.
even if we see very few nanodiamonds, it was very difficult to get enough optical signal out of it as if we put it under a microscope.
Right.
So I think initially, at least for maybe 6 months or so, it just felt like, oh, this is almost impossible.
Right. Like
Yeah.
we're looking at blank things, and
Yes,
there's
yes.
just nothing there. Yeah, it reminds me of when I first started cleanroom work, and I spent 2 months just trying to clean pieces of silicon.
Yeah.
And you clean it in every way you can imagine. You put it under the microscope, and it's just filthy. It's just, it's like, I thought I was losing my mind at some point. So I remember I asked one of the group mates. I was like, dude, I cannot get this clean. So I go back to him, and he's like, let me show you what a clean piece looks like. And he puts his piece under the microscope, and it is filthy.
Murphy's Law.
It turns out metal tweezers contaminate your pieces. So yeah, but it's crazy. Like those kinds of things where there's just nothing, and then just forever you look at it. So you graduate, you kind of wrap up your degree, and then you head off to a postdoc at Stanford. So what was how did you choose your postdoc? What did you find was important, and what parts of your PhD work were most useful in getting you to this next position?
Yeah, surely. I think one advice that, again, this was Vlad and Sasha both told me is that uh, so when you are really doing well in something, or actually, I think I should say this is something or Vlad told me in my first year. So he said, Guru, there are a lot of PhDs that come out. They're really good PhDs. But there are very rarely cases where there is such an impactful problem that is well defined for a PhD. So a problem that the whole community is seeking answers for. And and then a student gets to work on such an important problem. Then he
Right.
said, you are one such lucky person to have such a well defined, very important problem defined, and where any contribution that you make can be felt and then make a big difference to the world around. So I think his words were both inspirational at that point and then made or gave me motivation and then momentum to my research. And at the same time, they were also exactly true, as he said. I think I attribute again. I quote this story a lot of times. So this is I think very meaningful story, loaded with a lot of um, I think what should I say? Maybe I should say, okay, it has many shades of meaning to it, really
Right.
loaded with it. So one of them, this is a mentor told me sometime back when I was in India. So the story is like this. So there was, it seems, a rabbit that was doing a PhD. Okay, there were many rabbits who were doing PhDs, and there was a young, arrogant, immature rabbit which had just joined for PhD and then spent maybe some time, not too long. And
Yeah.
then suddenly it invited all other rabbits, saying that, "Oh, I'm hosting a carrot party. Come, I invite you all for this party." Everybody was like, "Okay, fine." But there was one really wise old rabbit which said, "Oh, what's the matter? What is the occasion?" And then this rabbit said, "Oh, it's my PhD defense. So I defended my PhD."
Hmm.
And everybody was like, "Oh, okay. What's your thesis?" And then the thesis, the little rabbit said, "My thesis topic is how rabbits hunt lions." What is this? Does it even make sense? What is happening here? And
Hmm.
after some time, after a little bit of commotion, there was a really wise rabbit there, which asked the real good question, the important question there. The key question is, who is your advisor?
Hmm.
And the little rabbit said, it's the lion.
Right.
So clearly, I think students, I mean, we are still quite not sure what path we take, how our PhDs turn out. But clearly, I think having an advisor that's like Lion or a visionary, I think
Hmm.
that makes a big difference. And that's what was the difference in my PhD, and
Hmm.
which made my path for my postdoc or even the career path that I have chosen now. I think all of them set there. So clearly, that was quite a bit of turning point.
Yeah, it reminds me of this. It's like in this Looney Tune cartoons, right? Where there's the little guy who's like, ah, and everyone gets scared, and then you look behind him, and there's this huge.
Yes.
I guess it's very similar. Uh, so, but how did you, of all the places to do postdoc, how did you choose to like? So we have the lion aspect, and that is giving you the kind of momentum to be able to go to this various postdocs. So how did you choose your postdoc? What were the things you considered the most? And
Yeah.
after you did postdoc, would you have done anything differently, or was there things you should have considered more before
Yeah.
applying?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. In fact, I had a lot of opportunity, I mean, at least avenues open in front of me. For example, I had an industry job already as a research position in an industry lab with me already. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I had also this Stanford postdoc, and then there was also a national lab which was interviewing me for a postdoc position.
Mm-hmm.
So I had all these three different avenues in front of me. And clearly, I think at that point, the choice comes down to what I really wanted to be down the lane, what I'll be really happy. And somehow, I think, I mean, I have never been in an industry so far up till this point in my life.
Right.
So somehow, my intuition was telling me that I would not survive in an industry, probably even an hour there. I would just feel unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I did interview to with all these places, and then my feeling about my aspirations, and then
Mm-hmm.
how these places would actually meet my aspirations.
Mm-hmm.
So finding it out by these interviews, I was pretty sure that it's academics where I'll be happy.
Okay.
No matter what salary I get, no matter where
Right.
I end up at, or all the uncertainties that I have in front of my right.
Right.
So I might not get an academic job later. Who knows? My
Right.
postdoc just turns out to be a failure. It could be, but
Right.
at that point, you just have to believe in yourself and make a decision. So clearly, the point that drove me was I was truly passionate about being an academician. Academic setting, academic atmosphere was what gave me a lot of satisfaction. So,
Okay. So what? So you mentioned that because I know a lot of people are at this point, right? A lot of people when they finish PhD, they have to make this decision of industry versus academia. What is it about academia that, like, what motivates you to do your work, right? Because, if you're doing, like with industry, I think it's a lot more straightforward in that you do research on products that people will literally use. But in academia, we make all kinds of stuff that may or may not ever have any direct use. So what is it that motivates you to do this research?
Yeah. Again, I think whenever I have such questions asked, I quote from Einstein. So let me do that. So it seems Einstein was interviewed by some press people who said, "You're so brilliant. Why don't you just open an industry or have your own industry, make so much money? Why are
Yeah.
you just struggling to write papers?" And this is what Einstein said. Let's say you have 1 penny, I have 1 penny, and we exchange our pennies. We just have 1 penny each at the end. But on
Right.
the other hand, let's say you have an idea, I have an idea. We exchange our ideas. Now we have 2 ideas each. So that's the beauty of academics. And that's
Okay.
exactly why I wanted to be in academics.
I see. So for you, the motivation is more that you're kind of contributing to the body of knowledge more than contributing to a product or something. So, but this, there's like a deeper level of this question of why are you motivated by this sort of creation of ideas, right? What is it that really is like, is it, at a sub level, why would you say that's interesting to you?
Yeah, I think talking to people and then getting perspectives, different perspectives about the same thing. So we just look at maybe just the same object that we have seen forever, for probably throughout our life. But now
Right.
getting a new perspective on the same thing is to me an internal joy. It's like maturity to myself. And that's what actually drives me. I mean, I think in this context, I should tell because Sasha is a poet too, so I can tell that. I mean, I do like poetry a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and the thing or mathematics, for example, those are all I feel the same thing, which is just expressing beauty in different forms,
Right.
which I don't know why we like, but we just like. That's just human beings, how we are. And I see that kind of beauty in academics because we see the same thing but from different perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and that gives a new idea, a new thought, a new way
Right.
to overcome a blockade, and that's what made it very interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that actually reminds me of one of the thoughts that I've always found really interesting is that all of the materials for every single thing that will ever be invented already exists. It just requires somebody to look at it in a different way to make something new. Uh, so you do your postdoc at Stanford. So what was like? It was about 3 years, so a bit long for a postdoc. So what did you do in that group, and how do you feel that influenced kind of your path to professorship?
Yeah, sure. I think I mean, my experience at Stanford in a way complemented my experience at Purdue,
Mm-hmm.
because at Purdue I was doing the work of a graduate student, like doing my research, also helping mentoring new grad students
Right.
who join the group, and then also lead some projects in the experimental efforts or analysis of results, etc. So
Mm-hmm.
those were all already giving me the experience that I need, for example, to be a professor or a manager or sitting in a manager position later.
Right.
So that was a good training. I would say that was extremely crucial, in fact, to
Mm-hmm.
survive later. But something complementary that I saw at Stanford was the style in Stanford in that group was very different in the
Mm-hmm.
sense the way projects were taken up and the way students pursue PhD, those were at least in the group was more derived from just the students themselves. So the
Mm-hmm.
students, first of all, they come from the cream of the world, and then they already have a lot of peer pressure that their
Right.
peers are doing in other, say, MIT or Berkeley or any somewhere else in
Right.
some particular way, and they want to excel that. So they are
Right.
already under that peer pressure, and since because of that, they didn't require a pressure or even a lot of follow up from advisor. So that has actually two consequences. So that's what I observe. So one of them is if there is a path that is already laid out for the project, that's probably not very appealing to those students because they want
Right.
to find out something new. So that's one of them. And the other thing which was the case was in this process, a lot of people, a lot of students also felt like at some point or the other, maybe, oh, is this the right path? So that kind of question comes to a lot of us. I mean, not just at Stanford, anywhere, right? So
Right.
that was also the situation with some of them, but now they're with tremendous peer pressure.
Yeah.
So that's the difference there. And
It's like,
and
I don't know if this is the right path, but I'm going to go as fast as possible.
Yeah, yeah. And I think working in such atmosphere and then motivating those kind of students to reach their goal or to reach their dream, and then telling them that it's not the path that is really important, which path we choose. We are scientists, so given a problem, we just solve it as a scientist would do. But we are not, for example, chosen to just pick the path of nanophotonics or
Right.
maybe some electronics or anything or materials. Whatever is a problem in front of me, I just solve it. Right.
Right.
So I think that kind of motivation and then helping them solve problems, and in the process actually learn about their problems, which are not actually my main project in the
Right.
PhD. So I actually learned them. In fact, currently I pursue a research on non-Hermitian physics in my group here at Rice. That was totally that I never worked on before.
Right. Right.
At Stanford, there was some other student, in fact, who was working on this that I used to interact a lot, and I developed a taste for it. And over time, I learned more, and we did so many discussion about what is the forefront of this field, what are the challenges, why people are facing these challenges, are there ways to overcome, etc. I think that actually made me learn how to synthesize or how to come up with new problems, not just follow the path or take the lead from somebody and follow, but actually be somebody who is more independent and then think or come up with ideas that can potentially grow into something big by themselves later. Yeah.
I see. Because when I look at applications actually for professorship, it seems like actually a critical problem a lot of applicants have is that once you're able to get through the interview stage, a lot of problems seem to arise from people not being able to formulate their own vision. They it's usually just saying, I've done all this work, so I'm going to keep doing kind of the same work, but there, and universities are not interested in somebody who won't generate the new kind of fields or generate novel directions within fields. But that brings me to the question: how many universities did you end up applying to leaving Stanford? And when you go through your application, right, you have the letters of recommendation, the statement of purpose, your research CV. If you had to give a rank order on the weight of each component, like what do you think is most important in an application, right? Like, so if you had to apply 80-20, right, I give you one day to write all of your application, which segments would you focus the most on to make sure that they're the most detailed or highest quality?
Yeah, clearly it's a research proposal. Nothing else is more important. I mean, I'm applying to a faculty position. So faculty, the main job of a faculty is to come up with ideas and then communicate the ideas to people. And then if I'm excited, only then I can excite somebody else, inspire them to work on this topic or collaborate with me or complement with them. So that's an essential component. So to be a good presenter, somebody who can engage with your audience and at the same time convince them that this is a great topic. So that communication was another extremely important aspect. And the rest of the part is finally it also comes to managing. So at some point you're a leader, right? So as a leader, you have to take initiative and follow that, and at the same time inspire others to follow you. So you have to show that you can do all of these things, and train that way students who someday will or I hope will thank, just like how I thank my advisors, right? So that's, I mean, I always ask myself, can I rise to that is a level? Can I ever be like them? And that's something which really has to be at least articulated in a way that you have thought about this, and then you have some ideas about it. I mean, we are all are evolving, maturing over time, but at least there must be some solid thoughts, serious thoughts mentioned in this research proposal about those aspects.
Right.
And I think that was the one which actually I took the longest time to prepare and also run it by many people
Right.
who are not necessarily related to just my research field, but also just people generally outside of my field, but who could be just like experts and then have seen such kind of statements many times before. So there is no harm in just asking them if they can help. So
Right.
that I think is extremely important.
Yeah, this I noticed that whenever I do work is actually running it through, like you said, you always want to go to where the brilliant people are, but running it through all kinds of brilliant people, you very quickly start to burn off anything that's weak. It just doesn't survive because yeah, it's very difficult to fool. You can fool yourself, but fooling other people is harder.
No, yeah.
So, Joy actually has a question that says that you actually emphasize the importance of constructing important, impactful, and well-defined research projects. So, how do you, as a researcher, right? You read the literature, you look at the world around you. How do you pick, like, which projects to kind of push your students into, or conversely, how do you know if an area is not an area that a student should be pursuing? So, any advice on that front?
Just whatever I told the story of Einstein, just that. So academics is all about that. Talk to people. So Rice or Purdue or any place, surely we are not alone, right? So this is
Right.
not a one-man show. So we are here surrounded by really brilliant people around us, whether it's the same university or outside. We have peers who are
Right.
extremely creative, brilliant, and have a track record of being successful. So I think talking to them is the crucial part. So that's the way we know whether or can or how this idea is pursued. So or
Right.
perceived, excuse me. So let's say you have some idea X and you want to say that, okay, this will be the game changer. This is going to be my proposal. This will
Right.
make my career. You write it and then you get back from the program officer or this funding agency that, okay, sorry, better luck next time, right? So
Right.
when it happens, it's not uncommon, and it is a part of academic process. It has to happen. It
Right.
happens only just to challenge us. I mean, I like this academics only because I like to be challenged every day, and then where my creativity is challenged. So I think when I end up in such situations, how do I come out of it? Is I just talk to people, or even before submitting such a proposal, talk to them, ask them, okay, is this a good idea, or what do you think about this?
Right.
So you will surely, I think, know how people think, whether you can communicate whatever you have in your mind the same way, or is it something different?
Hmm.
Maybe the idea that you have in your mind is super exciting, but not the way you communicated it,
Right.
right? So that's also an important aspect. So we get to know only by talking to people, and that's all I have been doing since my Purdue time. Yeah.
And the only way to practice talking to people is just to talk to them.
No,
So,
yeah, that thanks to Vlad, thanks to Birck. In fact, I keep telling he even here at Rice that Birck has this very nice culture that students are not put in just one room just for a group. Instead, they're actually interleaved with many other groups. So, for example, my next door or next neighbor, next desk neighbor, was from mechanical engineering, and I
mhm.
had no idea about what these people do in mechanical engineering. From he was from Shang Fangshu's group, and I
Okay.
was like, wow, okay, talking to them gave me a new perspective, something that I had never thought about. Even, for
Right.
example, how to choose optical pose. And he had a good insight about it, about the mechanical stability, how to do ultra fast experiments with them.
Hmm.
As a new student, that was great. And then similarly, I have talked to many people. I think Bibash is one more who we collaborated with on this titanium nitride, etc., for a long time. But talking to these people was an extremely important aspect, which I think Birck did really well, just by putting these people together, people from so many different disciplines in one place,
building.
and then also interleaving the offices. So that was quite useful. I think it helped us formulate our ideas or come up with the solutions to problems without having to just take the traditional path.
Yeah, it reminds me of what Feynman said. He said that if you run into a very difficult problem in one field that has not been solved for a long time, it means that the tools of that field are not able to efficiently solve that problem, and you need ideas from other fields. So that's
Exactly.
We're running up really close to your meeting time,
Yes.
so it's 3:11. So I guess if you have any final advice for graduate students at Purdue, that would be great, and then we'll
Sure.
we'll try to not make you late.
Oh, no problem. Yeah. Clearly, I think something that I have learned over this long years of time is that PhD is really the time when we are so protected. We get to do the real science without having to worry about so many things around. And trust, I think once we get out of PhD, there are so many things to worry. There are so many, the equations just becomes complicated. The dimensionality of the space just suddenly increases by so many things. And this is something that at least I didn't appreciate as much when I was doing my PhD, that how much my advisors actually shielded me and then gave me a platform where I could just focus on doing science and then just do well with that. And I think this is a golden opportunity for everybody doing PhD, that make use of your PhD time. Just don't spend your time only on your project or just on whatever you are asked to do.
Right.
Go beyond. Just talk to people, find out what is happening. It could be just for fun, or it could be for science. Who knows what it ends up. It could do something even beyond. So, but talk to people and connect with them, and take this time as the best time to make an impact on the world scientifically. Of course, you have a lot of time later too, but again, it comes with baggage. And I think these are words from Vlad, I think passed on to him from his advisor, where he says life is not a 100-meter running race, but it's a marathon where where you don't have a nice path to run made for you. Instead, you have baggage tied to your legs, and you still have to run. And it's about survival. Who survives at the end? And that's what research is about. And the training in PhD is exactly like that. It actually trains you to be sturdy, endure this journey, not actually just come up with brilliant papers and then burn out in the end. That's not the process of it. So do enjoy the process of PhD while you're in there.
Oh, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Guru. And I want to echo what Joy said, is that this has been a really inspiring discussion. And it's, your students are very lucky to have you at Rice. And, we wish you the best with your future research.
Thank you very much. And this is a great opportunity. I wish I can meet you guys, see the Purdue campus, and see how Birck is doing sometime in future. But at least this is a shortcut to see you all. And especially I was so happy to see all my Purdue family members that I didn't get to meet them in conferences recently.